They told you women were divine, that their hearts were made of warmth and healing, that their love was purer, deeper, softer, that they were the answer to your chaos, the balm to your ache. And you believed it. Of course you did, because from the very first stories you ever heard, she was the prize, the angel, the healer, the mother, the muse. And you? You were the chaser, the protector, the fool with flowers in hand and knees in the dirt, offering everything just to be close to her. But what if that whole story wasn't just wrong? What if it was designed to keep you blind? What if women aren't angels? What if the woman you love isn't the missing piece of your soul, but just the reflection of your misunderstanding? See, Aristotle didn't dress womanhood in poetry. He didn't paint her with romance. He looked at her through nature's lens, no filters, no myths, no comfort. And what he saw? It wasn't cruelty, it wasn't hate. It was just a raw observation of form, of biology, of purpose. Not moral judgment, just function. But now this isn't about biology anymore. It's about the illusions you've built on top of that foundation. It's about what those illusions have cost you. Because here's the question no one wants to ask. What if love, at its core, isn't mutual? What if it's a hierarchy dressed up like devotion? What if every time you said, "I'm in love," you were really just kneeling at the altar of your own fantasy? You don't see her. You see your craving. You see the part of you that needs healing. And she? She sees your hunger and understands it. Maybe you think she's nurturing, or sweet, or soft. But look closer. That softness, it might be performance. Not always manipulative. Sometimes it's unconscious. But it's a performance nonetheless. Because if Aristotle was even partially right, then everything she does, everything she is, has been shaped by one thing: survival. Not because she's weak, not because she's deceptive, but because she's adaptive. She bends, she reads, she adjusts, not out of malice, but out of necessity. Because in a man's world, a woman learns that survival doesn't come from force. It comes from shape-shifting, from becoming what the dominant force desires. So the next time you look at her, ask yourself honestly, are you seeing her, or are you seeing your own projection? Do you love a person, or just the placeholder for everything unresolved inside you? The truth is, you don't want a woman. You want the idea of her. And that's where her power lives. She doesn't need to control you through strength. She only needs to reflect back what you're desperate to see. And once she does, once she echoes your hopes, your insecurities, your dreams, you fall. You surrender. Not because she's divine, but because you gave her divinity. Not because she's powerful, because you handed her the power. And what do you get in return? Approval, validation, that aching hope that she'll say, "You're enough." But what if she never meant to say that? What if she doesn't even see you? What if she only sees the version of you she can mold? And here's the uncomfortable truth most men avoid. She's not always listening for truth. She's listening for advantage. Not because she's cruel, but because that's how she survives. While you speak in vulnerability, she listens in calculation. While you offer your pain like an offering, she takes note of patterns, openings, leverage. And again, not because she's evil, but because she is not the origin. She is the response. You call her emotional, but look again. She's surgical. You think she's feeling, but really, she's scanning. every smile, every silence, every sigh. She registers it all, like code. She had to. Because when you're not the center, when you're not the default, you learn to survive by mastering subtlety. And in a world built by men, women mastered adaptation. You think she needs protection. She doesn't. She needs access. You think she's waiting on you. She's watching you. Watching how much of yourself you'll give away for the illusion of being loved. And once she sees that, once she knows where the cracks are, you stop being a man in her eyes. You become a resource. Not to hurt, but to help her stay centered, to survive. She doesn't move toward you. She moves around you. She flows. She adapts. She becomes essential, not by asking for power, but by becoming what power needs. And that isn't love. That's evolution. And evolution doesn't care about your feelings. So now here you are, worshiping softness, kneeling before strategy, still wondering why you feel hollow, why you give so much and feel so unseen. It's because you're not loving a woman. You're loving the story you wrote about her. And the tragedy? She knows. She knows exactly what you need her to be, and she gives it to you. Not because it's true, but because it works. Why would she break the illusion? Why would she step down from the pedestal you built? That pedestal gives her influence without confrontation. You call her mysterious, feminine, complicated. But there's nothing mysterious here. You're just choosing not to look. Because if you did, if you really saw her, you'd have to question everything. Her kindness might be calculation. Her softness might be strategy. Her affection might not be about you, but about what you represent. And if that's true, if she's just reflecting your own needs back at you, then what are you left with? A woman? Or a mirror? And the version of you she reflects, was it ever real? Or was it just the man you pretended to be to win a love she never actually offered? This is where the illusion cracks. This is where the mask slips. And this is where you start to see not her, but yourself. The man who thought he was loving when he was really bargaining. The man who thought he was giving when he was really sacrificing identity for approval. And when the reflection disappears, so do you.
You say she changed, that she stopped loving you, that she grew cold. But maybe she didn't change at all. Maybe she just stopped pretending. She stopped feeding the version of herself you needed to believe in. She stopped playing the character that made you feel like a man. And suddenly, you're broken, confused. Not because she left, but because your reflection left with her. You didn't lose love. You lost the illusion that made you feel lovable. That version of you, the one that felt worthy in her eyes, it only existed in her gaze. And now that gaze is gone, you're empty. Not because you lost her, but because you never really had you. You were stitched together with her attention. You were validated by her approval. You let yourself become defined by how she looked at you. And when she stopped looking, your identity collapsed. And that's not her fault. That's yours. You handed her your worth like it was a gift. You built your sense of value on the way she smiled, the way she touched your arm, the way she said your name. And Aristotle? He wasn't trying to insult women. He was pointing at nature. But nature is uncomfortable when it's not romanticized. It's cold. It's raw. It doesn't flatter your ego. You'd rather be seduced than be confronted. You'd rather feel needed than feel whole. You'd rather chase love then face truth. But she sees you. She always did. She saw how badly you wanted to be enough, how deeply you needed her to make you feel worthy. And she used that, not maliciously, but instinctively. Because when your form is not power but reaction, your strength becomes the mastery of perception. She didn't need brute force. She needed fluency, emotional fluency. She learned to manipulate attention, to provoke emotion, to center herself through your vulnerability. And she did it so well, you didn't even notice. You called it fate. You called it connection. You called it love. But it wasn't magic. It was measurement. She isn't mysterious. She's meticulous. Every pause, every tear, every moment of silence, it wasn't chaos. It was calculation. She isn't emotionally lost. She's emotionally literate. She knows the language of your heart better than you do. And she edits you, silently, precisely, until you forget your own voice and start speaking hers. And this is where men begin to crack. This is where the performance becomes unbearable. Because eventually the cracks start to show. The pedestal begins to wobble. And you begin to see what you didn't want to see. She doesn't admire you. She manages you. She doesn't uplift you. She rearranges you. And when you finally resist, when you say no, she pulls away. Not because she's hurt, but because the control is slipping. And without control, there's no leverage. And without leverage, there's no intimacy. Because in her world, intimacy isn't connection, it's choreography. And you've been dancing to her rhythm without even knowing the music was hers. You danced because it felt like closeness, because it felt like home, because the story of her grace wrapped itself around your loneliness like silk. But it wasn't grace. It was gravity. You didn't fall in love. You fell into orbit, around her moods, her needs, her silences, her reactions. And you called that connection. But connection without clarity is captivity. And you've been captive so long, you've mistaken the cage for care. You used to have edges, opinions, direction. Now, you hesitate. You self-censor. You shrink, all to keep her close. You call it love, but real love doesn't ask for your erasure. Real love doesn't punish your authenticity. And if the cost of her affection is your voice, your will, your spine, what you have isn't a relationship. It's a rehearsal for obedience. But still you defend her. You tell yourself she's just complicated, that she's been hurt, that she means well. But deep down, in the silence between those justifications, something inside you knows. She's not confused. She's crystal clear. She knows exactly what she's doing. She knows what she wants. She knows what buttons to press to get it. You think she's emotionally raw. She's not. She's emotionally precise. You think she's overwhelmed. No, she's calculating. Every outburst, every breakdown, every moment she pulls away, it's not a sign of weakness, it's a tool. Because in a system where the male holds the power and the female is considered deviation, the only way to win is to get him to hand over that power willingly. And you did. You gave it away like it was a gift, thinking it made you noble, but it didn't make you noble. It made you predictable, and predictable men are easy to break. She's been reading you since day one. Every compliment, a probe. Every, I love how honest you are, a calibration. She doesn't want your soul. She wants your pattern. Because once she knows it, she owns it. And once she owns it, she owns you. And you call that intimacy. But that's not intimacy. That's influence wearing a mask. Here's the betrayal you don't talk about. The part of you that knows deep down she doesn't admire you. She sees you not as a man, but as a project. Your strength, tolerated. Your vulnerability, archived, stored, ready to be used. You thought she was healing your wounds, but she was memorizing them. Because the one who knows where it hurts controls when it hurts. And that's why you stay quiet. Because to speak the truth would destroy the illusion. Because deep down, you know she was never yours. You were hers.
The pedestal you built, it wasn't a tribute. It was a stage, and you were performing the entire time. You played the man she needed you to be, not because she demanded it, but because you did. Because you thought if you were good enough, strong enough, sensitive enough, she would finally love you back the way you dreamed. But Aristotle wasn't trying to tell you women were malicious. He was telling you they're not divine, not broken, not evil, just different. Different not because of culture or conditioning, but because of design. Built not to lead, but to adapt. Not to conquer, but to outlast. Not to dominate, but to influence. And when you ignore that, when you refuse to see her nature, you don't get a partner, you get a trainer, and you become her subject. But here's the moment that matters, the moment that breaks the cycle, the moment you stop asking what she sees in you and finally ask, what do I see in me? Because once she's gone, once the script is over and the illusion collapses, what's left? You. And if that you is empty, hollow, disoriented, it's not because she took something from you. It's because you never built it to begin with. You outsourced your meaning to her, your purpose, your masculinity, your emotional center. You used her gaze as a mirror, her approval as fuel, her presence as identity. So when she leaves, it feels like death. But it's not death, it's exposure. You're not broken, you're revealed. And now the real work begins. The work you avoided your whole life, the inner work, the quiet, painful, unglamorous journey of becoming whole. Because for years you used her to avoid it. Used her to feel worthy without having to build worth. Used her to feel needed without having to face the parts of yourself you abandoned. But she never signed up to be your savior. She simply stepped into the role you cast her in, and she played it well. And now Aristotle's words echo louder than ever. Women are not saints, not monsters, not goddesses, just mirrors, warped by biology, shaped by survival. Not lesser, not higher, just different. And if you don't accept that difference, if you keep pretending she's the key to your wholeness, you'll always be chasing, always orbiting, always serving the myth. But here's the shift, the awakening. When you stop chasing reflections, you begin building reality. When you stop needing her to validate you, you start validating yourself. And the man who builds himself, he no longer fears her silence. He no longer collapses when she pulls back. He doesn't panic when she stops performing, because he is no longer performing either. He is present. He is sovereign. And she feels that. She will test it. But if you remain grounded, unshaken, the gravity shifts. The roles begin to change. The myth dies, and something real begins. Not fantasy, not fairy tale, not seduction, truth. She may resist it, she may leave,
She may try to pull you back into the man who once knelt at her altar. But if you hold your center, if you stop trying to be loved and start being real, then something radical becomes possible. Connection without control. Love without leverage. Intimacy without dependency. But only if you're willing to let the myth burn. Let it all burn. Let the fantasy collapse. Let the pedestal crack. Let the story drown in its own sentiment. And stand alone. Unedited, honest, whole. Face her not as a rescuer, not as a villain, not as a muse, but as difference. Not better, not worse, just different. And when you no longer need her to complete you, only then will you finally be capable of meeting her, truly. Because love isn't built on projection, it's built on presence. And presence only happens in the absence of illusion. So if this opened your eyes, if this shattered something false so you could finally build something true, don't keep it to yourself. Like the video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you're tired of the lies and ready for the real. And if you want to support this channel, check the link in the description. Every contribution helps keep these truths alive. But more than that, if you take one thing with you, let it be this. Stop chasing what you want to see. Start facing what is. Because in the end, the only love worth having is the one that sees clearly and stays anyway.